Good morning, everyone. It's Jessica here from Jaywalker Dog and Pet in Town. Today, I would like to talk to you about what your gear is telling your dog, and is it helping you or hindering your relationship and your activities? So to keep things simple and to avoid additional conflict, I'm going to say we are not going to be discussing aversive type gear like prong collars, choke chains, e-collars, anything that bases its effectiveness on eliciting pain or fear from the animal. Now, before I get my head bitten off for making these statements, these are all just my opinions, and there are definitely ways that you can teach a dog on a Y-shaped harness, back attachment harness, how to walk in a heel position. In fact, there are a lot of ways that you can do that without wearing any gear at all, which would be ideal. So in a perfect world, all of our dogs would walk around naked and they would walk right beside us when we want them to, and they would pay attention and all of those wonderful things. So we are talking about reality, and we're talking about tools that humans might need in order to help them teach. So there's a common idea around all harnesses being in this same box and that harnesses cause pulling. But let me just say that not all harnesses are equal, and where they attach on the body and what the mechanism does while there's contact on the body and the dog is pulling makes a big difference. So by far we know that the Y-shaped harness, so it has like an apron in the front, is the most comfortable harness for a dog to wear. We also know that most of those attach at the back. I notice a lot of the companies now are also putting attachment at the front, but either way, mostly attached at the back, it really is going to promote that pulling. And in the front, there's a lot of shifting that happens because it's not really designed to work that way. I find these Y-shaped harnesses and back attachment harnesses can be really good for what I call adventuring with your dog. So if you're just going to go out on an adventure and you're going to let your dog roam, and there's not going to be any expectation for them to be walking in line with you or any of those things, then that's the perfect harness to be choosing to do that with. If you're trying to teach your dog to stay in proximity to you, some people want the dog right beside them in that heel position, and some people are okay if the dog is a little bit further ahead or lagging behind. That's a personal decision. But if you want to teach them how to do that, and if you want to make sure that you have a connection that's going to support that, we may have to choose a different tool. So let's dive into the front attachment harness. Now, I'm not going to name any brand names, and there are actually quite a few companies who are producing a front attachment harness now, but we know the most popular ones. And the front attachment harness are notorious for shifting and restricting motion. So what happens is that when you clip here, and there's a martingale feature, that when the dog pulls, that martingale feature is going to squeeze. So it's going to kind of squeeze the shoulders together. And then you've got this kind of bit that's hanging out, and that's going to swing over one shoulder or the other typically, or up around the neck, and it's going to shift the product. So now you're squeezing the shoulders together and you're shifting the dog's body. So you're telling them to turn, but with your shoulders squeezed together, which is why it causes injuries. I always kind of tell people, like, think of like what it's like to try and like run or turn when you're in a mini skirt. So if you've worn a mini skirt, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. If you've not worn a mini skirt, then I just want you to squeeze your shoulders together in front of you and then try to turn. It's kind of hard to use your motion, move your motion like naturally when your shoulders are squeezed together in front of you like that. The other thing that happens is that it sits low on the chest, so it's impeding the full extension of the dog's legs. So when the dog tries to take a full stride, they can't. So they get the like little baby steps. And that's not really great for the dog because it's not allowing them to fully use their body. But what it does do is restrict movement and slow down pulling. So in that way, it is a very effective device. So next, let's move on to head halters. So head halters, just as they sound, they are halters that attach to the dog's head. And the idea behind that is that if you direct the head somewhere, guess what? The rest of the body follows. Now, not all head halters are equal either, because there are different attachment points and there are different mechanisms. Some of them squeeze when the dog is pulling on the leash, and where it's attached, if the dog pulls, it squeezes around the muzzle, and that is like really uncomfortable, and we're going to put that tool in its sort of that aversive box. So if we talk about the other types of head halters, so head halters that do not squeeze the muzzle and put elicit pain when the dog pulls. The other types of head halters that don't do that are really designed, again, to redirect the head. So if I can turn the dog's head this way, naturally the rest of the body is going to follow. Now, in principle, the head halter was a good idea. However, the dog's head and face are not the same as a horse's face. They are far more tender. They don't have the same muscular structure around the bridge of the nose, which is where it's attaching. And there's a lot of opportunities for there to cause damage in the ocular sockets. So we're putting pressure on the ocular sockets, and some dogs actually are prone to having their eyeballs pop out of their heads, like some of the pokey-eyed dogs. So we have to be careful about using head halters. The other piece of anecdotal information about head halters that I would like to impart is that I have never, ever met a dog who was comfortable or happy or eager to put on their head halter. Now, I may get some feedback on this saying my dog loves his head halter, and good for you if you've done a really good job of conditioning it. But part of the problem here, which is not the same as conditioning a muzzle, because a muzzle, it can be comfortable, it can be fit properly to the dog's face, and then there's no connection to it. So it shouldn't be moving or causing tension and pressure. But when you are connecting your leash to the dog's head halter, you're going to have pressure on the face. And this way, I feel there's no way to fully condition a dog to wearing a head halter. So next I want to talk about leash wrapping, which is another big thing that's coming up. We see a lot of trainers using this. So they're wrapping the leash around the head to create a head halter, or they're wrapping the leash around the body, the front of the body or the waist, to create some sort of harness attachment. But all of these things have in common is the cinching effect. So again, we're going to take that and we're going to put that into the aversive box. So we're going to talk about flat collars. Flat collars are just collars that basically they don't change in shape and size when you connect to them. And this is actually how I was trained to handle dogs, was on a flat collar. And when I learned how to handle dogs on a flat collar, one of the things that we did was we did neck reining. Like we would pull to 90 degrees. So if the dog was putting tension, we would move our bodies to 90 degrees so that we weren't putting pressure on the trachea, but instead to the side of the neck. And dogs have really strong necks. A lot of dogs have very strong necks. So to a certain degree, they can take this pressure. However, it can cause trachea damage, because as good of a handler as you may be, making sure you're always pulling to 90 degrees can be really difficult. And part of the reason why we did always go 90 degrees to the dog's neck was because we were also able to create this momentum from the side, which was a lot easier to redirect movement. So there's another type of collar that a lot of my clients and colleagues use, which is a martingale collar. And this is a collar that does have a mechanism, martingale. So when you connect to the martingale part and the dog pulls, it does cinch on the neck, but there's a stopping point at which it's going to cinch. So generally speaking, we fit the collars loose, and we fit them so that even when that is fully cinched up, it's still not squeezing in a painful way on the dog's neck. It's usually a really good idea for dogs who have like a neck and a head that are kind of like the same width or almost the same width, because you really want it to be able to stay on the dog for safety reasons. So obviously I'm going to talk about the Jaywalker harness, which is my invention, and that is the side attachment harness. It is the only patented side attachment harness on the market, and it is designed to redirect movement, and the connection point is on the side of the chest, of the shoulder. So there's a clip on either side that you can attach your leash to. The other important thing here is the fitting. We want to make sure that it is below the trachea across the front, but above the shoulder points, because we want to allow dogs to have full extension of their front legs. So when properly fitted, we're not impeding the trachea, we're not impeding extension of the legs, and we are kind of in that sweet spot where a collarbone would be on a dog. So next, let's talk about that connection point. So we have a leash connected here. There are martingale features on either side. When the dog hits the end of the leash, it's going to, again, sort of extend out that martingale piece. So you're going to have some extra webbing that's going to come out. And what we don't want is for the harness to be loose enough that it's just kind of hanging there and that the two metal pieces at the bottom are touching together. What we do want is for those to be compressing, and then from across the other side of the shoulder, it's asking, this shoulder is moving back, and because we have this perfect motion across the front, it's telling the dog to turn in a natural motion back towards the handler. So we get this redirection happening. So based on all these other tools that we were talking about, I mean, a lot of the principle behind them was to try and redirect movement, but how they were doing them wasn't necessarily in a kind way or in a direct way, and it was causing other issues. Now, obviously, handling is really important. So making sure that you're handling your dog properly and that you understand what your leash connection is telling your dog. If you're connected on the side attachment of the Jaywalker harness and your leash is coming up over across the top of the shoulders and you put tension on that, you're actually now asking the dog to kind of flip upside down, putting that shoulder in the air, and that wouldn't be fair. Just like if you're clipped on the back attachment harness and you pull back on your dog, you're asking them to elevate off their front legs and go kind of bipedal. So knowing and understanding what your gear is telling your dog and how you are connecting to your dog really matters. So make sure that you understand your gear, what it tells your dog, how it's moving the dog's body, and making sure that it's comfortable and properly fitted no matter what tool you choose to use. And of course, I highly recommend that you check out the Jaywalker dog harness. Look at the link below, www.jaywackerdogharness.com, and you're going to learn so much about how to use the gear, because every time you purchase a Jaywalker harness, it comes with a free online Jaywalking Like a Pro course, which also talks to you about how to prepare for walks and different skills that you can use when you're walking with your dog to help make it a better experience for everyone involved.